All right, and we are live. Hi, everybody.
Nifty.
This is Gearface sitting down with D, notable for having so many Exceed-related accolades that I can't fit them all on one page, even if I type really small. He's here to teach me about a couple of Season 3 characters today. This is probably going to get split up into some different VODs and get turned into guides later. Um, so I believe we are. If you're good with it, D, we can start with Akuma.
Cool.
But I'm
Yeah.
I'm good with
I-
whoever you want.
I'll let you spawn the character. Why don't you break out the reference sets and maybe get that deck shelved up?
Yeah, sounds
I
great.
also want to issue a quick disclaimer. I'll probably try to repeat this since before each character as we split this up. But I think folks know in general who have heard me talk online a lot, or I guess watched me talk, whatever. Whether you've heard or read my words before, I tend to be cautious about telling people like this is the right way to play a thing because there often isn't a right way to play a thing. Things are valuable in different situations, and there are different perspectives. Exceed is a game where the playstyle of the player and the choices you make allow you to express yourself differently, but through making different choices, and they're not necessarily right or wrong. I find that really interesting. That's something that's really cool about fighting games is how player expression is possible even while you're still optimizing. Like two people can both be playing optimally under certain metrics and look very different, and I think that's really cool. Um, so when I say
Absolutely.
things are correct, incorrect, don't take it as gospel truth. Play the character yourself. Especially if you disagree with me, go play it differently. Like do the thing that you want to do, play the way you want to play.
Yep. And just adding on to that, we're going to be discussing things mostly in terms of playing to win in this whole series. As a blanket statement up front, if you don't care particularly about playing to win, uh, the advice is always play the thing that is cool and play the thing that is most fun to you and the thing that keeps you playing the game.
Hmm.
Um, so we might be talking about some lines of play that don't always match with either the fantasy of the character or what you want to do with the character, and that's totally fine as well. Um,
Yep.
and there's
If
there's
you hear
plenty.
advice and you go, "That's not exciting," then don't do it.
Yep, pretty much.
Hmm.
So, D, I don't know how you like to start your lessons. I generally ask for at the start just like a very like sort of skeletal uh, character game plan and kind of a breakdown of their kit, but I want to let you lead the lesson.
Sure. So to begin with, there are two characters on the table right now. It's one card, it's one deck, but there are two characters in play. I think that's often underrated is that there are actually two discrete major strategic lines of play that are viable for Akuma. Um, the one that is more popular is the one that is generally more stable. It's also considerably easier, which is what we call defensive. Well, is what has been nicknamed defensive set play. If you're a fighting game player, this is confusing because set play means something different in fighting games. We ripped off the term and then we beat it up in an alley, and now we use it to mean setup, um, which is weird. I mean, that's because that originally started because characters who do things that in fighting games are set play often end up being defensive pressure characters in Exceed, or at least there are characters that can exert defensive pressure, which I'm not going to go into a ton of detail there because you're going to. Uh, this character does that, so like it will be explained as I explain how Akuma works. However, the other Akuma line, so we've got our defensive set play Akuma. The other Akuma line is Rushdown Akuma. Um, Excuse me. And again, see my disclaimer before. There's obviously not just two ways to play the character, but as far as I'm concerned, the two major strategic lines for Akuma are defensive set play, Rushdown Akuma. Um, Despite what you might expect from my reputation and my general affects, I never ran Rushdown Akuma. I have done it a few times to try it out to experiment with it, but my normal Akuma line is defensive set play, which is kind of considered the more standard line. It's like this is the expected way to play Akuma because it's stable. It's actually a lot easier than the other line, and it's less anxiety inducing for you for the Akuma player. Um, they're both incredibly anxiety inducing for the opponents
Yep,
because that's Akuma life.
it's part of the
Uh,
fun.
yeah, because so Akuma's ability says critical, meaning when you set your attack, you may spin a gauge to activate this effect. Um, this is a Street Fighter mechanic. It's going to be based across all of season 3. I don't know if that needs to be covered separately, but yeah. So let me be explicit. When you set your attack, you may spin a gauge. If you do, your attack is critical, which means that all of its critical effects activate. This means if you have a character critical effect, you get that. If you have critical effects printed on your cards, you will get. Thank you. Yeah, mouse over some of this.
Good help.
You will get that. So if your attack is critical, you get all the triggers. All right, cool. So Akuma says all of his attacks have this critical trigger in addition to whatever's printed on them, which says you have +2 power. That
As
might
does
not
your
look like
opponent.
what it says. Uh, well, about that.
Yep.
Yeah. So the first thing to know about Akuma is that symmetry is a lie.
Yep.
Because if you have +2 power and you stun your opponent by being faster than them and dealing enough damage to break their guard, they don't have +2 power. They're stuns. I mean, they do have +2 power, but like you don't care, right? Um, in a literal sense, they do have the power bonus, but they can't use it because you have guaranteed that the only time that you use that is when you pay out in a way that they can't respond. For the like simplest examples of this, if we just look at, let's see, here you go, this thing. All right, so this is a 1 of 2, so effective range 1 and 2 because of the before effect. Power 3, speed 7. It's a DP. This is a common defensive shape. Card shape. I don't know how. I'll be as technical as I'm naturally inclined to be, and let me know if things are unclear.
No problem.
All right, so common defensive shape. This is like the standard shape, which is it loses to like weird guardy shapes such as spike or dust if you're coming here from Guilty or Shroud the board game. But it beats a bunch of things that are fast. So this will outspeed cross, it will outspeed assault, it will outspeed various on and under curve pokes at ranges 1 and 2. And on 2 especially on defense, it's very reliable. Does 3 damage, so it doesn't break guard of anything that is actually meaningfully guardy, because anything that is intended to guard through something is going to have more than 2 guard on it. 3 is the minimum number because the lowest power among normals is 3. All right,
So,
fine and good.
so a DP is going to hit. It isn't necessarily going to win.
Yep.
Okay. And when it does win, it wins by going faster than the fast thing.
Yeah. Like you play a DP when you're like, okay, they're going to play something like this. Like they're going to try to cross away, or they're going to play an assault maybe, or, some character special that is also doesn't have guard and then isn't speed 7. And so you go, aha, I'm faster than you. Like you initiated, but I'm outspeeding you and popping you, and you are stunned because you didn't expect me to have a thing that would do that. And so if you know your opponent has a DP, the way that you deal with it is that you initiate with guardy moves and you laugh as they play a DP and you sweep them.
And you trade up massively because the upside of winning with the DP is not necessarily in its damage.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. So the DP is designed to be a defensive tool that will let you win by outspeeding other pokes. It's just like other pokes, however, it loses to counterattacks. And it is often an important enough defensive tool that getting it wrong is a problem. But what I mean by that is, for example, with just the normals, if you play cross going, my opponent is playing sweep, and you get hit by grasp, that's bad. But the real problem is, you do that twice, and now you don't have any crosses, and they play sweep and they hit you. Right? Like, you ran out of the option that you needed to deal with this. So if you get your DPs baited by counterattacks, that means you don't have your DP for when you actually need it.
Right.
That actually happened to me recently in a tournament where my DP got baited by my opponent initiating with their DP. It was Soul versus Jin. And because of that, I didn't have my DP when I actually needed it. That was excruciating. Anyway, that's a different matter. All right. That dynamic makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And
cool.
And to elaborate on something that you were saying, and when I said both players have +2 power, and you sort of said, maybe not. When I was first learning this game, I remember calling Akuma a gamble character, or a character who needs to call his opponent's moves correctly. And it sounds like what you're saying, and what I've heard from other players, is that the Akuma line is essentially making it so that you never have to gamble if you can possibly help it.
Correct. Defensive Setplay Akuma is not a gambler. He's the exact opposite. He's an incredibly safe character.
Right.
So So now that I've explained how this attack shape works, all right, with +2 power, this still doesn't stun sweep. Still
And
doesn't stun focus.
in fact, takes even more from Akuma's
Yes.
ability. So it's even a worse idea to go into it.
Well, it's equally bad. The thing is that it's equally bad at the cost of a gauge. So you're saying I'm spinning a gauge so that we both have +2 power, which means that if we actually both get +2 power on this strike, where we actually both hit each other,
You're down
I'm
on
spinning a gauge for
value.
nothing.
Gotcha.
Like that sucks. You
Right.
don't want that.
Right.
There are times where it's okay to do that, but by and large, not okay. All right. So now let's talk about breakpoints, which is the idea of numeric thresholds that make things really, really strong. So we've got a 3 power attack here. We can make it 5. Well, you stick a power boost on, and now it becomes 7. That's enough to break sweep.
Right.
You're in exceed mode, and this is 8, which is enough to stun focus, the normal with the highest printed defenses.
Right.
You'll stun focus, you'll stun sweep. If you can stun focus and outspeed the fastest normal that can hit you, that means that you have a 100% win, right? Like this card does not lose to anything, barring specials and ultras.
Right.
Um,
Something weird that a range 1 dodge or something like that. But among the normals, there isn't anything that this loses to at that point.
right. It's like if your opponent has a speed 9, because they're a ninja or whatever, like be aware of that. But if they don't, you're just going, okay, I'm faster than you, and also, even though I'm playing a poke, the part of the mix-up triangle that's supposed to lose to counterattacks,
Right.
I'm gonna stun your counterattacks, so I just win.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's true of every character, but not many characters can make that happen with one boost and an exceed effect the way that Akuma can.
Yes.
Okay.
That's the key here is that what Akuma's ability actually says, and this is the interesting thing is that you spend 2 gauge in a turn to upgrade your ability by 1.
Right. But that
And
one is
that
very
upgrade
important.
is so important.
Yeah.
It's astonishingly important because of how breakpoints work.
Sure.
Because it means that if you go, okay, if at any point in time you have in your hands these 2 cards, then you know that if you ever are in exceed mode, you can play an EX Assault that has 8 power.
Yep. And is above curve. You can play it. You can crit defensively as well.
Yes, you can at range 3. You can respond with it and still have an 8 power assault.
Yeah.
Like it's horrifying. All right. So in order to do this kind of stuff, right, a character needs consistent access to stat bonuses that allow them to hit meaningful breakpoints.
Sure.
And the reason defensive Setplay Akuma is like the standard line is because Akuma has, like, I don't know, maybe the best continuous boost kit since Marathi,
So
at least relative to his release.
I'm seeing +2 power. I'm seeing +1 speed. I'm seeing +1 power. I'm seeing effectively +3 speed, especially when you're in exceed mode. I'm seeing lots and lots of power.
Yeah, he has 2 speed boosts, 2 power boosts, and then a couple other things.
Yep.
3 other things.
And I'm also noticing as you're pulling out these cards, other than this card that you demoed as being the particularly fast thing, without those additional speed bonuses, almost everything else in his kit is quite sensitive to speed and is much harder to reach those safe breakpoints. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, he's speed sensitive. He's a character where he needs to outspeed you to get value, and he does not have guard, like no printed defenses.
Right.
So being speed, that's when I say speed sensitive, that's what I mean. Is that if he is outsped, he is sad, right? Like he's sensitive to his speed being outdone.
It's easy.
No printed defenses.
The way that you say it, it makes it sound like he's also like emotionally sensitive to it. He's like, oh,
he is. It's really disappointing. It's very sad day to be a Akuma.
That's why he's so grumpy all the time.
Yeah, I once did a tier list of expressions across the Street Fighter cast, and Akuma is on the frowny end of the scale.
Definitely. Yeah, it's because he's been outsped. Yep.
But yeah, he's been outsped. Sagat, strangely, is even sadder, and I can't explain that one because Sagat is... Yeah, anyway. That's another story. But yeah, so looking at these attack shapes, he's got on curve, on or sometimes above curve, depending on how it works.
Yep.
Below curve.
Yep.
Below curve. this thing.
Yep.
So
DP.
this is obviously the standout.
Yes.
And then below curve, below curve.
Yep.
Like he's got a bunch of mid speeds. So he goes, okay, well, what if I'm holding this card that is a mid speed, and by mid speed I mean that it beats anything slower, loses to anything faster.
Mhm.
And then, since I'm in exceed mode, I play this boost, which reads I have +3 speed.
Yes, because when you're in exceed mode and you crit, you will always have +3 power.
Exactly. So you
Okay.
go, okay, this is a +3 speed boost, so that my next attack will have +3 power, +3 speed at the cost of a gauge in this card. And now
Yes.
I have a speed 7, power 7, ignore armor, which stuns focus and stuns sweep, and
Yep.
is unblockable and outspeeds everything.
Yep. And has a range dodge afterward in case somehow something goes wrong.
Yep. Which we'll come back to the value of that range dodge, because actually that range dodge does not matter for Setplay Akuma.
Okay.
Well, for different Setplay Akuma. Because if he's playing Hakushu, he's either boosting it or he's playing it when it's unbeatable. So the after effect is cosmetic. Like the after effect sometimes covers, oh, my opponent had EX focus.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Like,
So the very edge case things where
yeah, they actually have enough defenses.
because when you say unbeatable, there is an asterisk on next to that word, although it in some cases for Akuma maybe it's a slightly small asterisk. When we say unbeatable and exceed, sometimes we don't mean there's not a single card in the whole game that stops this card, but it's generally unbeatable.
Right.
Right.
And in fact, I would say, as a rule, we do not mean there's no card in Exceed that can stop it, because there are a bunch of cards in Exceed.
Sure.
We got everything from the opponent can't move to dodge attacks at range 1, dodge attacks with lower speed, dodge attacks with
Right.
higher speed, I think.
Yep.
Do we have that one? Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do.
Crazy above
Like,
curve options that could stun it out.
yeah, like there's all kinds of random stuff throughout the game. So, there's probably something that would beat it. Whatever it is, it's just a matter
Right.
of setup.
Right.
So, like, for example, this is unbeatable unless Carl Clover plays Deus Ex Machina and you walk onto Nirvana and then it hits at range 0, and you take 13 damage. Oops.
Right.
Guess you're dead.
So when I'm evaluating, a character into a matchup that I've never played before, do you think it's wise? One of the first things that I should be looking at is these are my assumptions about things that are unbeatable. Oh wait, what does this character that I'm playing into have that might actually change those assumptions?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and the first thing that you care about, actually, as a speed sensitive character who relies on defensive set play, the first thing you care about is, what do they have that's above curve?
Right.
Because you want to know when you can play something that is quote unquote safe, which is to say that it is guaranteed to go off. Because if you're Akuma and you know that you outspeed the opponent, that means you can win the strike.
Yeah.
Um, and it is actually essential that you exceed at some point in order to make this true, because that breakpoint is enormous. It changes a ton of interactions.
Right.
But yeah, so generally what Akuma does, and this is the defensive set play loop, is on his turn he goes, all right, let me look at my hand, figure out like what the most relevant threats are at the current range, and then probably play a boost.
Yep.
And it's just a question of which boost. And so, like, by default, he's going to say, all right, if I'm at a range where I already can outspeed my opponent, so if I have gauge and I'm at range 4, this is a above curve. This is a fast fireball at that point.
Yep.
Or if I'm already at range 2, or if I'm holding an EX, like EX Assault at range 3,
Yep.
then I boost power. Because I know that if my opponent strikes, I will outspeed them and win the strike.
Right.
If that's not true, if I do not know that I can win the strike if my opponent initiates, then I boost speed. Because now, with speed in play, if my opponent strikes, I can probably guarantee that I hit with something. And the deceptive thing here is that even with speed in play, you very well might not want to add this, unless you happen to know that you can hit a breakpoint where this speed and this power together mean that your attack doesn't lose to anything.
Right.
Because, and I'm giving that as an example. Obviously, he also loves this.
Sure.
Like, he will usually boost this instead of playing this attack.
Okay. And then obviously, where is it? Your +3 speed boost on Raging Demon.
Yeah, which is affectionately known as tech bait, right? So
yes. Yeah.
some characters have one boost that is so good that you need to tech it, and it's this one.
Right.
Which does mean that uh, there are variations on Akuma's lines of play which involve reading dive
Sure.
at early mid game points, where you go, well, my opponent hasn't seen this yet, like you haven't played it yet. Maybe you just hit your exceed mode. You're like, all right, they've got at least 5 cards in hands. Let's see if I can punish them for holding on to dive.
Right.
Fortunately, he wasn't given a really good set of punish tools for dealing with that are reliable in other cases. Like usually his best punish is reading dive, play assault at range 3 with the crit up.
Right.
It's often not worth doing.
And the punish in that case is as much doing the damage as it is getting rid of the dive, because now you have more access to this boost.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, like that's winning 2 strikes at once, because you're winning that strike and you're also winning the one where you have this in play.
Right.
The drawback is that you're giving up the strike that you would have won with focus. Because here's the thing about speed sensitive characters, right? Nothing in this kit has guard. There will be times that I don't have this set up or I don't have tools to capitalize on it, which means I'm going to be reliant on universal defensive options.
Yep.
That is, say, wild swings, focus, cross.
Yep.
And focus in particular is an extremely stable, reliable defensive tool. And people often, if you're throwing speed boosters around, want to go to range 1 against you.
Yeah, that was I
Um,
was going to ask about counterplay to this and hope that you would discuss the range 1 play to
mhm.
try to sort of diffuse the places where speed is most important.
Yep. Yeah, there's a running joke in Exceed that range 1 is where speed doesn't matter. Because it among normals, if you don't think about where the walls are in the arena, range 1 is where like there are no mid-speed interactions that really change, except that cross is unbeatable, which means that you just turned cross from probably 3 damage that was safe to probably 3 damage that is safe.
Right.
That is definitely safe, which is meh. Whereas
Yeah.
at range 3, +2 speed turns spike into guaranteed 5 damage, kills everything, or dive into guaranteed 3 damage, probably 5, but kills everything.
Yeah.
Uh,
Dodges, you can't win back, or can't be hit back generally.
yep. And if you're Akuma and you're at range 3 with +2 speed, then you have additional, at least one additional option, which is potentially a 6 or 7 power speed 6
Unblockable.
that, yeah, unblockable and uncounterable, even if you're holding something like EX Sweep or EX Focus or whatever.
Right.
I say EX Focus as though it helps because the armor here is ignored,
Yeah.
so that part doesn't matter.
Right.
But yeah, so
Okay.
people see a speed boost drop, and if they don't have a way to counterplay it, or especially if they know the Akuma matchup and they go, "Oh, you boosted light, I can't tech that because I got to tech this."
Because I have ultra double light over here.
Yeah,
Right.
and so you go, "Okay, well, then how do I counterplay this?" Well, you probably initiate or you move to range 1 or some combination. Because at range 1, you go, "Well, the only way that he actually cleanly beats focus in this side at least, is this card."
Right.
Um,
Which is
because
undercurve
defensive
and now is suddenly slightly unsafe. It's at least a mix up.
yeah, because it loses to grasp.
Right.
He does have another tool. Defensive Setplay Akuma does not play it, however. The other thing that beats focus is this, which means that you're playing light sweep with crit.
With a crit. Wow.
Yeah, this is
Okay.
deceptively safe because this is a speed 4 attack with 6 guard and 8 power, and that 6 guard matters because at speed 4, especially if he's initiating, the thing that outspeeds it is assault, which has 4 power,
4 power, which even with
which
the
means
plus
6
2
power.
power. Right. Okay.
So specifically in basic mode, this is a thing that happens, but it is almost never played because defensive set play Akuma is going to get more value out of playing that light again later.
Right.
He's just going to say, I'm not doing that to beat focus. If you play focus, whatever, we'll trade.
I will accept the life loss.
Yeah, and he generally won't crit if he thinks that's what's happening. Is he
Sure.
goes, all right, if we trade normally, because that is Akuma life. Akuma goes, all right, I'm going to probably trade down a number of strikes, build up some gauge, exceed, and then deal 20 damage in 2 strikes, and then
Right.
you lose. Thing is that Akuma will often be low on life, and even if it's not literally on life trades, how do I put this? He should be down on life because he should be using this boost.
Okay.
Because even if you're a defensive set play player, and not all of them would agree with this claim, but turns are valuable. And if you're Akuma, life, not as much. Because if you successfully set up your in-game as a defensively Akuma, then you're not getting hit. Like,
Right.
if your opponent hits you, then you're playing block or focus, and you're mitigating your loss. If you're hitting your opponent, they're not hitting you back.
Right.
Because they are definitely 100% stunned. So use this to spend that life that you would otherwise have spent like trading on your fast pokes to build a hand without giving your opponent time to like play their own boosts. Because you really don't want them to have a good boost game. That's like the
Right.
worst thing that can happen.
Right.
Okay. So let's see other notes in this. So the standard kind of line involves looking for these two boosts early, so that you can guarantee at least one gauge quickly.
Yep.
Because fake out, if you're playing properly, is guaranteed gauge because you can make a situation where you're guaranteed to get your after effects even if you don't hit.
Right. Okay.
Like you can play this with cross if you want to. I wouldn't recommend doing that unless you also have this so that you can hit them after you cross away.
Right.
And I do mean on turn 1. Like you could boost this and play cross if you want to. Just guarantee a gauge, but then you definitely want to have either this or block in your hand so that if they do something at range, you have something that will generate value because you don't want to be stuck
out.
just like wild swinging.
Right.
Yeah. Crossing out is positioning negative for Akuma as it is for most characters.
Right.
But if you have one of these available, then you can still get value for a couple of turns. And the important thing, so like actually, a pretty common Akuma play for me is boost this, play block from range 4.
Okay. On turn 1 if you can. So now you've got 2 gauge. You're not stunned out by anything. You probably didn't take too much in return.
Yeah, like there's a decent chance my opponent like played their own block to guarantee their own gauge because they're like, well, whatever this is, I don't want to deal with it. Especially because they don't know in advance if you're playing an EX because of how this boost works. So they're like, yeah, I'm probably not going to try to call a mix up here. I'm probably just going to play a block, maybe a focus. And so you go, okay, you can have it.
And that's because that's the value of the opponent setting the card first, is that you get to see whether they're EXing the attack.
Yes. So yeah, so the actual thing that happens here is you play this boost, and then the opponent goes, okay, well, unless I'm setting an EX, like, I'm not safe against very many things. Like, if we assume the opponent is not somebody who has unusually good openers or unusually good range 4 options, then you play this, and you're saying, hey, maybe I'm holding EX Dive. Maybe I'm holding EX Go Hidoken? Whatever the name of this card is.
Yep.
Thanks. Because if the opponent sets an EX, they're like, you're playing Dive or Go Hidoken. And then Akuma plays EX Dive or EX Go Hidoken, so you both played the EX Speed 4 option. Akuma wins a speed tie because he initiated. And that is devastating for the opponent, especially if they actually threw Dive on this. Like, the opponent generally does not want to play EX Dive because,
Right, you really, really want that for teching.
You really, really want it. Throwing both of them away on like turn 1 is pretty horrifying.
Right.
So they usually don't respond with that way, even if they want to. They'll usually be like, well, if he's playing Dive or Tatsu or Go Hidoken, I can just play block, focus, mitigate my losses. Block guarantees me some gauge. That's probably good. I'll probably do that. And so everybody gets gauge. Everybody's happy. Akuma has 2 gauge.
And your gauge you're banking on the fact that your gauge is more valuable than your opponent's, and in many cases it probably is. Correct?
Kind of. That is the intuitive thing, but that's actually not quite true. What you are saying is the value of me getting here is specifically like the value of my first 3 gauge is probably more valuable than my opponent getting their first 3 gauge.
And that's 3, despite the fact that Akuma's exceed cost is 2, because you need something in gauge still to crit with. Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So like 2 is great, but if you spend 2 to exceed, you can't use your ability yet because you don't have any gauge left.
Right. Okay.
So like you need to eventually have 3 so that you can start playing. And so a common solution to that is to have this available next so that you can end up by adding this to gauge, take another action.
Okay. So I'm noticing that the cards that we've spent the most time talking about from Akuma's kit so far have been Hyakishu and Go Shoryuken, both as an attack and as a boost.
Yeah,
and
correct.
From what I'm hearing, this is an unbelievably good payout card when you're in Exceed mode and have your endgame set up, and before that, it is there for its boost to get you there. Go Sure You Can is very similar. It's incredible payout value, but before you have that, it's really Ashura Senku. Is that a good rule of thumb?
You can also play this non-crit as an attack and just to have a DP,
Okay.
right? Whereas Hakushu, you will almost never play non-crit / not setup because the
Right.
payout is really valuable for you when you're set up.
Right.
But yes, you're right. Like this boost is what gets you set up. This attack is how you pay out later in the game. This boost is how you correct bad situations or get set up early. This attack is how you correct bad situations or land late game payouts.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
and so yeah, these are the crux of your entire game plan when you're playing Setplay Akuma. Because everything else you go, all right, boost, boost, boost. Whoops, that was a don't mind that. And force.
Okay. I was actually about to ask, what are my force, or where is my force coming from? You know, if I've got great crits, you know, maybe not playable ultras most of the time for attacks. What am I generating for force?
Yeah,
So,
you're drawing cards with this so that you
yep,
can replace cards that you spent, and you're
yep,
paying for force with this because um, you're never playing this attack if you're running this line, and you'll rarely play this boost because this boost is the second boost you play, or in some cases, it is the boost you play when you're holding an EX.
okay,
Because the value of this boost is I already know I'm winning the next strike. I'm doubling down.
right. So,
Sorry, that sounds wrong. Doubling down is a gambling metaphor, right?
right,
But it's not that. It's saying I'm already winning. I'm just going to win twice as hard.
right. So, and that goes back to what you were saying earlier when, you know, what is Akuma boosting? If he is not sure he's winning the next strike, it's speed. If he is sure he's winning the next strike, it's power. Or
Yes.
rather, if he's sure that it is his next attack is landing, he's boosting power so he can ensure that the next attack wins the strike. This
Yes.
does not help him win new strikes. This helps him win harder.
Yes. To paraphrase, I'm attempting to quote, but I'll probably only end up paraphrasing a very good friend of mine. Power is the threat that speed delivers.
Okay.
Um, uh, it's you need both. They're both actually valuable. I'm notorious for overvaluing speed because I played a lot of season 2, and that's a whole other story.
Right.
But like if you're confident you're faster, you really really want power.
Yeah.
If you have power and you're Akuma, you probably do. Then you really want speed.
Okay. So when you say that this is the second boost you play, it's because the first thing that you've played is something that can guarantee that the strike is going to land, like a speed boost,
Yes.
or like you said, an EX, because that already sort of does that without having to spend a turn on it.
Yeah. So like if you have any of these in play, or if you're holding an EX that would normally be on curve but is now above curve,
Okay.
then you can play this and look your opponent in the eye and say your move.
Right.
Because they're gonna look at that and go, oh, you have +3 speed and +6 power.
Yeah.
Um,
They start writing their last will and testament.
yeah, like
It's a bad look for them.
what they do here is they play reading.
Okay.
And they
Just
pray.
Hail Mary. Just try to get those
Yes.
off the table. Okay.
Yeah. Which relatedly, when you ask what do you spend as force, I said this is how you replenish your hands.
Mhm.
This is paid as force most of the time.
Okay.
The cards you spend as force are mostly normals.
Okay.
You want to get rid of normals that are vulnerable to reading because when you're running this kind of defensive playstyle, the thing that you are most vulnerable to is you've overextended your setup, your opponent is desperate, they're backed up against the wall, which means that it's now time for them to reading you, and your entire setup can fall apart in an instant.
Mhm.
Because you've pushed them far enough that they have no better choice. This is my legacy of losing Akuma games is I overextend my setup because I have so much of an upper hand that there's nothing my opponent can do about it except run a Hail Mary.
Yeah.
And then when the Hail Mary works, I lose. Not necessarily the game, but at least a lot of value.
At least
Because
the strike and all the things that you use to set up the strike.
yes, like if I'm legitimately in these two boosts are in play, it's like and they reading me and I lose the strike clean because of it.
Right.
I've lost you know what
Four,
three or four strikes of value.
You're right.
Like
4 force from your 2 ultras, the thing you put down, uh, incredibly powerful boosts, the turns that you've spent. Yeah, that's a lot of value to lose, and that's hard to come back from, I'm sure.
yeah, it's awful. So that's why, like, you want to play in a way that is generally safe against reading, and you can't ever be completely safe against reading when you're running this kind of defensive play style, because you're going to tend to have a decent sized hand because you need to, in order to
Right.
make sure that you can have the X's and have the boosts that you need and that sort of thing.
Right. Okay.
But the hope is generally that you are spending the cards that are the most vulnerable at all times, so that your
Okay.
hand is minimally susceptible to reading. And that's just how defensive Setplay works in general, by the way.
Right. One of the other things that I was going to ask about, and I'm glad that the conversation went here, is just use cases for the different attacks as attacks versus as boosts. It sounds like, for the most part, with two exceptions, Akuma is leaning fairly heavily into a boost game on this line of play. You mentioned sometimes when Gohado is a viable alternative. What about Tatsu and Zugai in terms of attacks?
So Gohado has utility as a speed option because it can be above a curve. You already mentioned that, right? It's a fast projectile that actually does decent damage. It can sometimes be a 6 power speed type projectile if you're in exceed mode. That's really cool.
Yep.
This is a critical EX attack. You will only ever play it as a critical EX attack, or I guess you can have like this and be in exceed mode. Because the way this hit effect works means that it doesn't lose to sweeper focus. Right?
Okay.
Because if they play sweeper focus, you have 3 + 3 + 2.
+2. Yeah.
They're stunned.
Right.
So like 6 power isn't safe against sweep. 8 power is, so it just fixes that problem for you.
Okay.
But if you don't have this boost, then you're generally going to EX it and crit on either side, but usually in exceed mode, because why are you wasting gauge in basic mode if you are playing this line? Like,
if you're trying to exceed.
Yeah, you want to rush exceed. So like you will play this EX crit as an alternative payout option to other options that you could have if you just ended up needing to spend your preferred late game payouts.
Okay.
It is also nice just for the like fact that EX makes it on curve at range 2. And you can go, okay, I don't need to spend my DP to be fast at range 2. I don't need to spend a speed boost to make Yakushu safe at range 2. I can just play an EX from hands with a crit instead of having a boost in play. So it's something that you can do in one turn instead of 2 turns. Because most of his stuff is you have to play a boost one turn and then wait for your payout.
Right. Okay. So this has sort of niche utility as a burst option, basically, as a sudden. You've been caught without your setup, but you want to do a lot of damage, and you have the EX.
Yeah, it's like I need to hit them now for a bunch of damage, and it is my turn. You don't use it on defense.
Right.
You go, all right. This is my way to do that now. Whereas Goshoryu is your defensive option that you might need to reserve for things, and then Hyakuhu is you actually manage to create a setup, and now you capitalize on your setup.
Right.
Zugai is I don't have a setup. I just need to kill you.
Right. And it's good at doing that under certain circumstances.
Yeah, it's good at doing that when they don't have a DP, so they don't have a way to outspeed it. Notably, please remember everyone in the game has a DP. It's called EX Cross at range 2, EX Grasp at range 1. So if they have no crosses down, you don't play EX Zugai Hazatsu and trust that it will outspeed them because they can outspeed you.
Right.
Because also people are going to usually expect your EX to be this card or a normal, because you almost never need to EX Goshoryu. Or Yaku, for that matter.
It's much more important to hit with these twice than to get one more power out of them, because you're not hitting a significant breakpoint.
Right.
Because they've already hit those breakpoints.
Exactly. Like the reason you exit is because you needed the speed. That's the only reason.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So and then this is a boost. Ignore the attack.
Okay. Makes sense.
Yep. Defensive Setplay Akuma does not play that attack. Only plays the boost.
That kind of thing is actually, I find, pretty useful to be able to sort of turn off options in your head, especially for a new player that's saying, all right, no, this is just a boost.
Yep.
I'm assuming, speaking of turning off options in your head, I'm assuming that Akuma, especially in this line of play, is very, 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 very unlikely to ever crit bluff, correct?
Oh, Lord. Yeah, no.
Right.
Don't do it.
Okay, sounds good.
Because here's the thing, right? Akuma's crit bluff is never a bluff. Because of how his ability works.
That's true. Okay, so you are at least threatening +3 power. It doesn't matter that this card does not have crit text on it. It does have crit text on it. It's just on a different card.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Like, if you say I'm playing critical block, then what you're actually saying is I'm playing block and giving you +3 power at the cost of 1 gauge.
Right.
Like, it's so much worse. right? Like the reason that you generally crit bluff is to get somebody to play a thing that it's to improve your mix up, where you go, I played a crit strike at range 2 or a crit EX at range 1, so you're like, it's axe kick because I'm playing against Ken, and of course it's axe kick because axe kick is unbeatable.
Right.
All right, fine, I guess I'll play sweep because it's Tatsu. Oh, oh,
Uh-oh.
and you just get stuns. And you're like, wait, but Tatsu doesn't have any crit effects. Yeah, it has the crit effect. Your opponent thinks that it's axe kick. That's the crit effects on that card.
Right.
And it's
There's
very
nothing
clear
like
enough.
that. There's nothing like that for Akuma because everything he does crits. Everything he crits has that effect.
Right.
That makes sense.
It's yeah, you're not improving your mix up by making the opponent think it's X or Y in the majority of cases. And certainly not on this line. On this line, you're never going to do that.
Right.
Um,
Um,
mhm.
does Akuma have a specific preferred range? To me, it's looking like 2 and 3 because of his payout cards. Probably not zoning, despite Gohado being a useful projectile. Is he looking to stay in that range, or is he just kind of going with what his hand uh, is telling him to
Uh,
go with?
so it depends on what portion of the game you're in, like what phase of the game you're in. It's 1, 2, or 3. It's typically 2 by default. You like being at 2 because you can hold this as a threat,
Okay.
and you want your opponent to be worried about it. And at 1 and 3, they're less worried about it.
Right.
When he likes range 1, it's usually because he's over here or because his hand is low and he's over here. I mean, sorry, basic exceed mode. I don't mean like the corner. I mean
I
like
gotcha. Yep.
yeah. Because at range 1, you're playing block, you're playing focus, you're maybe playing cross, you're playing maybe sweep, but mostly you're playing focus, and you're going, okay, I'm just playing some normals. I'm just trading a bit. I'm gonna build up some gauge. Like that's your breathing room of like, I'm not actually running Akuma right now. I'm waiting until I have the hand that will let me run Akuma.
Right.
And range 1 is great for that because at range 1, you don't have to worry about mid speeds. You can just play focus and be like,
Right.
all right, what's my worst case? They cross out, whatever. Like that's nominal payout at best. So
Okay.
less true
That
against grapplers, obviously. Against
right.
grapplers, nobody loves being at range 1 against grapplers, so don't do that.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, and going back to what I asked earlier about when I'm preparing for a matchup that I'm not familiar with. Okay, so early game, do they have something that beats my normals at range 1? My slow normals at range 1. Mid and late game, do they have a DP? Do they have anything that can go above curve that can stop these cards?
yeah,
Um,
you still care about above curve early game because also early game you're going to like to play things that are on curve and just to land a hit, just
to
to
get
go, I can
gauge.
guarantee some gauge.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay. That makes
like
sense.
you can just play a raw grasp at range 1 and be like, okay, if I play grasp and they play sweep, that's unfortunate, but I got my gauge and they have 1 fewer light in their deck. Cool.
Right. Okay.
Um, assuming they have light, your boost may
So
vary.
so before, that's a good point. Yeah, because it's with season 6 and season 7 in rotation, that's not always an option. So
Mhm.
before we move on to Rushdown Akuma, which I also would love to hear about, I wanted to take a minute to talk about counterplay to this line. What obviously this is matchup dependent, and different characters are going to have different options, but we have now outlined the Akuma thing.
Mhm.
It is now incumbent on my opponent to stop the Akuma thing, and it's now incumbent on me to stop them from stopping it. And we've discussed tech. Do they have any particular parry targets? I assume it's Raging Demon for the same reason that. Yep, I'm assuming it's the payout cards.
It's these 3, yeah, are the main ones,
Okay.
and usually you'll parry this. Um, it's generally not worth it to block an Akuma payout, especially if he's threatening Hakushu, because that blocking Hakushu is about the worst thing you can do.
Right. It's
Don't
got
do that.
ignore armor.
Yeah, but like
Okay.
he's usually going to play it when it doesn't matter what you play, it just wins, and so you wild swing because it's the most reasonable thing you can do.
Right.
But yeah, so like parry wise, you get rid of these things, and it depends on what you are more concerned about. If you, the player, or you, the character you're playing, are like, man, I'm super speed sensitive. I don't want my opponent to outspeed me. You parry these, and especially if you like range 2, then you need to kill this. You need this threat to be offline, or at least you need to play carefully to bait it at pivotal moments where you go, if if so, like if you're, for example, see Viper, you're like, man, range 2 is great for me. I've got all these speed 5 things that do like 9 damage, uh, rounding 7 or 9 damage. Um, oh, boy, they sure all get obliterated by Gosho Yukin. You need to actually play a little thoughtfully. You need to go, okay, there are times that I need to initiate at range 2 with like sweep and focus.
Mm.
Just so that occasionally he will do this. Like I need to make and then you can parry for hand information, which is say you parry naming this, and then if you're wrong, you go, okay, what does he have?
How can I
And
capitalize on it?
yeah, and even if he'll probably pitch his normals after that because that's what you do if your opponent has reading. But you can still go, okay, well, looking at the cards that he had left, what boost did he have? And then what do I expect to have happen? Like if he's holding EX Go Hidoken, he's gonna feel safe at range. And so he's more likely to try to run away with things. So he's probably not going to want to sit around in close range. And that can inform like how you position on your after effects and that sort of thing.
Right.
But yeah, so you parry targets are these things. The general counterplay to defensive set play, like that the loop pattern, because the theory of defensive set play is what we've outlined, right? It is your turn. You go, all right, I'm playing this boost, and end your turn. Now if my opponent strikes, I'll win the strike because I have a boost in play.
Right.
So the opponent has to do something about this boost. Maybe they go to range 1, where quote unquote speed doesn't matter. Maybe they tech it. Maybe they like initiate with an EX. Maybe they play a boost of their own. But whatever they do,
They've spent their
it's my
turn.
turn next.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, and so I can just, hey, I can do more, or I can do whatever. I can do more things.
Yes.
And so you just always have an advantage. That's defensive set play theory, right? That's like that's actual taxi meta is
Yes.
the idea that you are maintaining an advantage on your opponent's turn. And the critical flaw in this, no pun intended, is that it's not true that just because you have a boost in play means you're winning the strike if the opponent initiates.
Right.
Because if the opponent has the ability to decide when the strike happens consistently, then
Which
the
they
opponent
do.
can decide.
And they do have that ability because you're ceding your turn to them by playing
Yeah.
this boost.
Exactly. You're giving it to them. You're saying,
Yes.
hey, yeah, you can always decide how the strike happens, but I'm always going to have a stat advantage.
Right.
Then the opponent goes, okay, well, then I need to play smart and say and run corners of a mix-up that require you to commit. And so, like, we're at range 3, and you have +1 speed in play, and I strike, and you go, huh? Well, if I play assault, I just win, right? And you critical strike with your assault, and I played cross, and now you've lost a gauge.
Right.
And it might have been your only gauge because of how this character often works. And if that's true, you're depressed.
Yes. Once again, his poor face. This is why he's so he's either been outsped or he committed to a mix up and the opponent played cross is why he looks like this.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you go, all right, well, I don't want them to be able to cross out, so I'll play EX assaults. Okay, cool. Well, if you're in Exceed mode and you had EX assault, this was your payout. All right.
Yep.
That was going to happen at some point. Now that one's down. Now we're at range 1. Move on with your lives. Like if you have something that is unbeatable, then you're going to play it. And whose turn you play it on? Like, how do I put this? You'll never play it on your own turn if you know that it's going to win on your opponent's turn. And so that's
Yes.
where you get into the thing of how much do you extend versus overextend versus be at risk of reading and that sort of thing.
Okay.
And so the opponent's answer to that is, at some point, I take the plunge, and at some point you'll go over the character named Ulrich from season 1, who has an interesting feature, which is that Ulrich can spend an arbitrary number of turns adding more power to an attack that will always hit you no matter where you are.
Yep. This is inevitability.
Inevitability. Stun
Yes.
immunity, ignore armor before close 8. And Ulrich can just boost power every turn. And if you look at this and you're like, man, how do I deal with this? The answer is you lose to it and you move on with your life.
And then the rest of the game happens because he has committed his resources and he can't do it again.
Right. Like he has 2 inevitabilities. He has a lot of power boosts.
Yes.
But he only has 2 inevitabilities. So you'll eat it twice per game. Okay. Accept that. Move on.
Right.
And that's generally how Akuma payouts work is the ones that are unavoidable, you'll eat them. Like I said, he's going to hit you for 10 or 11 a couple times per game. He can probably guarantee that. Obviously, you don't want to make it trivial, but you also don't need to panic about it. You can go, okay, he got his actual guarantee in. He paid the appropriate price for it. Now we play some Exceed. Now he spent some resources.
Right.
That EX Grit cost him 2 cards from hands and a card from Gauge. And it also committed whatever boost it was that he played.
Right.
Um,
And
so like
when you say
back,
he paid the appropriate price for it, you're talking about the time he spent setting up, the resources he spent setting up. But are you also talking about if you manage to make him pay a little bit more? Um,
if you can do that, then you're actually winning,
okay, I
right?
see.
Like you should expect that he's going to get the value that he's paying for, most of the time. And the 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 key part of playing against this kind of Akuma is that he is going to occasionally find those windows where it's like, okay, he's got the boost he needs, he's got the attacks he needs. He's now moving into engineering an attack that's completely unbeatable. It will be completely unbeatable, assuming that the Akuma player is skilled enough.
Yes.
Um, and like what you should expect is he will play that unbeatable thing. Um, he will take some massive chunk of your life out. Your job is win before and win after.
Right.
Like
So don't spend that cross uh trying to escape the unbeatable thing. Spend the cross when he is
yes, but
when
so like
he's still setting up or right afterward or when he's at least trying to mix you up rather than saying I already won.
exactly, right? So like this boost is an example of like you can play a cross here or an assault, and he has to actually think about what he plays,
Mhm.
or even a focus sometimes. And it's like, well, if he played the EX assault, then that's an EX assault you didn't have to eat later. Anything else, it's a situation where he has to actually kind of commit something. Mostly what happens if he boosts this and you strike is that he plays the on curve button or he just wild swings and it's like, I'm not throwing anything at this, and he doesn't crit. He's
Right.
like, you called my bluff, right? If he actually had a payout on it, okay, that was one of his payouts, and it was only this boost. It wasn't something much worse than that,
There wasn't 20 power on it.
right?
Yeah, okay.
Whereas in situations where he is here and you have literally no techs, you can go for the Hail Mary reading. Like I said, people often will do that, and that is something Akuma does not like dealing with. That is a reasonable play. It's not one
Mhm.
that I particularly like, but um, it is like it is legitimately reasonable. It's a good option because of how the board plays out.
Right.
Um, but like you can also just go, okay, well, you know, I'll wild swing, right? Like, and now Akuma goes like, okay, well, assuming we're not at range one. At range one, you actually can initiate with grasp and it diffuses Hyakushu. But at range 2 or 3, it's like, all right, well, I guess I'll play the 7 power Hyakushu and get my damage in because I need to guarantee the damage.
Right.
Um, but that's 7 damage, not 10.
Not
You know,
13, something like
not
that. Yeah.
13. Not
Yeah.
50. Yeah, it's like, okay, you'll take a lump occasionally. Um, or
So,
you can spend the time preparing and then wait for the next boost to come out and then do a reading or something. But like, you got to be careful if you're giving him turns and he does more of this and you don't have a plan, he'll just kill you.
yeah.
So like,
It
when you see the first one come out, you have to go, all right, am I teching? Am I reading? Am I wild swinging? And if the answer is I don't know, I'm just going to sit back and prepare, then he will kill you. Like
right.
he will just add another boost and then add another boost, and
It
then
it
you die.
it's interesting because when I asked about, how do you counter the counterplay, what I was expecting was that you had to, inflect your line of play in some way to account for the counterplay. But what you're saying is basically that the way that you counter the counterplay is play your line very, very well and very efficiently, so that even with the counterplay taken into account, you are still winning overall.
Yeah, like play because the thing with defensive set play, at least my experience with it, I'm not the best defensive player overall.
Mhm.
I perform better playing aggressively, and part of that is that it is how I learn and what I cut my teeth on, and the people that I played against. Because
Yeah.
I, as a regular opponent, had somebody who was and might still be, but he's kind of rusty anyway. Was one of the best defensive players in the game at all,
Yes.
which meant that I knew that if we are both trying to set up something long term, he wins
Right.
100% of the time. So I can't give him the time to set something up by trying to set my own thing up. I have to instead say, no, you're not allowed to play the game at your speed. You have to play the game at my speed.
Right.
Um, and so but yeah, so that the thing about defensive players is that when they're skilled enough, they will occasionally have these things because the characters they play will allow them to do it. They will go, okay, at least twice this game, I'm getting an attack off that you cannot do anything about, and it's going to get a bunch of damage in.
Right.
And their goal is to make you so afraid of that that you waste time. That gives them opportunities to rebuild their resources, to add on extra payouts, to
Right. To win even
do
harder than they were going to win anyway.
exactly. And
Okay.
what you kind of need to do is take your lump just let that go off and go, okay, you got that, but you can't keep doing it forever.
Yeah.
Because also the benefit of being aggressive and the drawback of being defensive, as it were, in this specific context, is that a lot of players will go, I'm in a vulnerable position. I'm Akuma and I'm actually trading down. I need to look like I have my setup. So I'm going to throw out something like this or this to buy time because I need my opponent not to strike into me. I need them to think that I'm going to have something horrifying. And if you call that every time, a non-trivial percentage of the time, you are preventing them from actually getting the payout that they need.
Right, because they're wasting their time. They're wasting their resources bluffing.
Yeah, like and usually the first thing that they will throw out is a speed boost, and they'll go, okay, I have wherever sweep is, I have +2 speed in play.
Yeah.
So you can't strike me. That gives me time to draw cards and look for the actual cards that I want to play, which I'm pretending to have, but I don't have.
Right.
And if you strike into it every time, then they will go, all right, you got me, I wild swing.
Right.
Some proportion of the time. Like this is a leading into variance way of dealing with this. I kind of prefer you just let them win when they are committing to a setup, and then the rest of the time you press them hard with your own game plan.
Okay.
But those are different ways that you can approach this situation. The thing you generally should not do against a character that has a solid, stable defensive set play line is try to out setup them. Right? Unless your character is better at it and you are better at doing it with your character than they are at theirs, you shouldn't go, oh, you got speed boost. All right, I'll play my own speed boost.
Right.
Because you don't win a boost war against these kind of characters. The land war in Asia, boost war with Yaquis.
Okay. So who are some other characters I'm thinking about? I have a couple ideas from my own experiences, but I'm thinking about like Ryu and Sagat as characters who might be able to actually sustain a boost war with Akuma. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Those are some of the few. And it's still a little tight because and that's because of this thing.
Yes.
Until Akuma is in Exceed mode, then actually those characters can generally stay ahead of him in a boost war. But this on Akuma is stronger than Way of the Warrior on Ryu or Ken.
Okay.
It is a 1 gauge boost that is +3 power, +3 speed, instead of a 1 force boost that is +2 power, +2 speed.
Right. And that those +1s, as you were talking about at the beginning of this lesson about his Exceed mode critical, that's an important number in Exceed 3.
It's enormous.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. 3, 1 is a little more than 0. 2 is noticeably more than 1. 3 is a lot more than 2.
Yes. Is that I've heard that adage applied largely to power. Is that true of speed as well?
Yeah. One is it is, because one is only a little more than 1, because if you boost +1 speed past turn, well, you're not doing much more than just striking.
Right.
It's because if you strike, you win the speed tie anyway. So you're just saying, oh, now I'll win the speed tie on your turn. So you're just doing a slightly different resource shape of initiating, which is meh. And then +2 speed is now I'm ahead of you meaningfully if you initiate, and if I get to initiate, then I'm 2 steps up, which makes spike on curve. And dive above curve.
Isn't it why so many +1 speed boosts have some kind of hit effect as well to kind of make them be worth it?
Yeah, they have a rider. It's not always a hit. Sometimes it's a now effect. But yes, because if you just had a +1 speed boost,
you might as well have just played something as an attack.
Yeah, you should have just struck.
Okay, interesting. That makes sense.
Yeah, +1 speed past turn is essentially nothing.
Right.
Not literally, but it largely.
Okay.
The big thing is what it forces from your opponent. That's the main difference, right? Because +1 speed on your turn is actually meaningful.
Right.
+1 speed on your turn is like +2 speed on the opponent's turn. And then 3 is where breakpoints come in, and you go, oh, at +3 speed, assault outspeeds cross, and dive. Sorry, +2 speed assault outspeeds cross, +3 speed dive outspeeds cross. And there's also a lot of mid speeds hover around 3 to 4, non coincidentally, and so they will often turn into things that suddenly can't be escaped.
Right.
Where it's like, my speed 4 mid speed now outspeeds grasp and just wins.
Right. I mean, +2 speed already makes Spike a very scary threat at range 3.
Yeah.
Adding another speed on top of it. Right.
And then it's, oops, you can't cross either.
Right.
You know,
Okay.
it's EX cross or die.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Relatedly, 4 is not very much more than 3.
Okay.
In both power and speed. It is more than 3, but it's like closer the difference between 1 and 2 than
1 and
between 2
2.
and 3. Like
Okay.
the 2 and 3 break point is much bigger.
Okay. That makes
Uh,
sense.
mhm.
Do you want to quickly talk about Rushdown Akuma as well, or do you have more things that you want to share about defensive Setplay Akuma?
Nothing immediately comes to mind about defensive Setplay Akuma. I will note one more thing, which is there may be times where you're like, man, I'm looking for that dive. They're not playing it. They're not playing it. They're not playing it.
Mm-hmm.
They're waiting for me to boost this. I don't want to play the reading, or I played my focuses already. I don't have reading, so I can't just get the dive out of their hands. Don't really want to parry the dive. I need my block for gauge earlier. Man, what do I do about the situation where I have this card in hands and I know that if I boost it, it's just going to get teched? The answer to that is you build 3 gauge, and then you boost a different speed boost.
Right.
And now you're holding spike.
Right. And a really scary spike.
An 11 power spike that almost nobody sees coming. Because
Right.
they are, if they're playing that way, the way I just described, they know about this boost. They're playing against this boost. They have forgotten the attack on this card.
I don't
But
remember the attack on this card.
yeah, and you go, wow, they haven't played any techs because they haven't seen any of these. That means I'm holding EX Wrath of the Raging Demon, so I just need +2 speed to win the game.
Yeah.
Because this becomes a speed 6 12 power spike
I think
that hits 1 to 3.
I think 11 power might be the biggest number I've ever forgotten about in Exceed, because you're completely right. To me, this is a +3 speed boost,
and that's normal. Yeah. Okay, so did that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. This has been great so far. Yeah, I would love to hear a little bit about Rushdown Akuma.
Okay. Yeah, so let's talk about the other major Akuma line. This is one that I actually didn't always know existed until a local friend of mine did it to me, and I never recovered.
And
Anyway,
you never forgot it again.
it's memorable. All right, hold on. One of these was a reference card. Well, whatever. I don't know. The cards have all gotten mixed up. Doesn't matter.
That's okay.
Yeah. So here's the essence of Rushdown Akuma. I have +2 power always. I will run the same number of mix-ups that everyone does. When I am not confident in my mix-up, then I don't commit to it, and I don't have +2 power, so I'm going to win or lose the normal amounts. But when I am confident in my mix-up, then when I win the mix-up, I win extremely hard.
Right.
I also, when I am committing to it, have a slightly stronger mix-up than most people, because +2 power changes a bunch of breakpoints in little subtle ways.
Right.
And then, so Rushdown Akuma actually often doesn't get to Exceed because he's too gauge hungry. And so the way this line generally works is that you still like this boost because you want 1 gauge at all times. If you ever drop to 0 gauge, you're extremely sad. You're not really a character anymore.
Okay.
With 0 gauge, you're not Akuma. Whereas defensive Setplay Akuma is like, with 0 gauge, I still have a whole boost kit. Rushdown Akuma is going like, with 0 gauge, what am I even doing here? Like,
right. Why am I playing this character?
Yeah, I don't have an ability. This is pointless. But you value this boost very highly. The attack is less important because, sorry, let me rephrase that. You're perfectly willing to boost the first copy. Having 1 copy available in your deck is really important because it creates a threat the opponent has to think about.
Yep.
If at all times you are threatening to have this, it forces them to participate in mix-ups.
Yep.
Yeah, so this, and to a lesser extent cross, are like the very fast buttons that you want to make sure that you have available. And if the second copy drops, then you probably reshuffle. Because you need your opponent to know that these mix-ups are live. Both sides of fake out are valuable. You will like I said, play this to get 1 gauge.
Mm-hmm.
This is actually where this attack shines, by the way. Like defensive Setplay uses this as a payout.
Yes.
Rushdown Akuma can often lean on this as a defensive tool.
And actually use that after effect.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like don't bother critting it. Just go, okay, I need to filter a sweep. I'm not like, I either don't have gauge or I can't afford to have 0 gauge on my next turn. right? So my opponent initiates, and I go, well, if I have 1 gauge and I call it wrong, I have 0 gauge. That's not an acceptable loss condition.
Okay.
And so I'll just play this and beat everything slower than it. Um, everything with an asterisk, as with everything. But yeah.
Yep. Yep.
And you go, wow, this attack is actually really, really good, even without being crit, even without having +3 power and +3 speed and all that nonsense. It's just an attack that beats everything slower than it.
Right.
That's really good. Um, you can just play it, and you often will, because just having that, like, this is if you just call the mix up right, you win the strike card.
Yep.
And it's extremely good at being that. It's actually the card in his kit that most shines at being that, because everything else requires him to commit something to it. Hyakushu is just, if I'm faster, I win.
It's just a button.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, like you can
But
just press it. You don't have to spend a gauge on it.
D, before you continue with this line, just a quick question for you. Is there any ability to transition between defensive set play and Rushdown Akuma mid-game, or are these lines that you need to commit your resources to ahead of time? You need to know what you're playing.
That's an excellent question, because for a lot of characters, their resource commitments are so intense that you do have to decide basically from the start of the game. I would say the big thing, the issue that arises from trying to transition, is that the way that you spend your resources is going to, like, slightly damage your options later in most cases. So
Mhm.
specifically, if you start with defensive set play, you're probably throwing out your speed boosts, and then your reload boost and such, right? Like, you're throwing these things out,
Right.
and that diminishes the number that you have available, because actually you value all of these attacks if
So
you
so
are running
so
Rushdown.
now you're hurting your own mix-ups by taking these offline for playing them as boosts. But when you're defensive set play Akuma, you don't care about that because you're not running mix-ups. You're running big unbeatable
You're running
things.
setups. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And if you're Rushdown Akuma, then the only reason it's hard to transition out of Rushdown Akuma is because you're spending your resources pretty freely. But thanks to these 2 boosts going to gauge, it's actually not uncommon for Rushdown Akuma to be able to transition into Setplay Akuma, where it's like,
Okay.
oh wait, I hit 3 gauge. Cool.
Let me just flip.
Let me flip, and now I can choose to start playing more defensively if I want to.
Okay.
Also, Rushdown Akuma will still do this, where he goes, oh, I have 3 gauge, let me exceed, and I'm still playing Rushdown.
Right. Oh, okay.
Like
And you just win harder when you win.
yeah, you win harder, and also several of my this, by the way, this is when Rushdown plays Tatsu, not in basic mode, but in exceed mode.
Okay. To
Um,
hit that crucial 7 to stop sweep.
yes, he will either
Um.
play Tatsu to kill sweep, or he will play and either side he will actually play EX Tatsu.
Okay.
Because it is generally better than boosting Spite, is just holding out for the EX and then playing a +2 or +3 power EX Tatsu that doesn't lose to anything
Right.
in most cases. Um, but yeah, you like having access to that. So you'll play 1 Hyakushu, you'll play an EX Tatsu. You can play 1 or both Zugais. This is another one where it's like, yeah, you really want to be in exceed mode if you think your opponent plays focus. If you think they're going to play a sweep, then you're fine being in basic mode, because that breakpoint changes. This card actually, like, really keenly illustrates the difference between 2 and 3 for
2
his
and 3.
ability, because
Yeah.
yeah, 7 breaks sweep, 8 breaks focus, and that difference is really important.
Yep.
Um, this attack is still hard to play, by the way.
Even in rushdown mode.
Well, because you don't build the gauge.
Right.
Like, it's 4 gauge that you're just not going to have.
You're still
Um,
critting. You might still exceed even. You're just not going to have it.
yeah.
Okay.
And there are times that you'll look at this and you'll look at the board and be like, well, I'm gonna pay like maybe 2 of these and 2 cards from Gauge to change card 6 and build a fresh hands.
Yep.
Like, you just need the force more than you are willing to build up for the attack. So yeah, so the attack still generally does not get played very much by Rushdown Akuma. I have seen it happen. I've gotten killed by this played at range 1 with Fierce and no crit.
Oh my god.
Yeah, that it's deceptive, right? You're
Yeah.
like, well, he's got Fierce in play. Okay, what's the worst that could happen if he does whatever, and then he does whatever, and you go, oh, 10. 10 is a number. All right.
Yeah,
Huh.
I mean, this isn't the kind of card, like, you have never said like this is a bad card or anything like that. But if it were, this is not the kind of card that you forget about and survive. Right? Like if
Mhm.
you, it might not be played often, but that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be live in your mind as a possibility that you could just get exploded by it.
Right. And if you're playing against an Akuma who is willing to commit Gauge to mix-ups, then you really can't forget any corner of his mix-up, because
Right.
he can catch you out with anything.
Right.
He can go, and he, especially Rushdown Akuma, loves playing EXs, because EXs with this basic mode are in fact +3 power, +1 speed, and that's
Right.
ridiculous.
Which is enough to make all of his breakpoints, just like in exceed mode,
Yep.
as actually more dangerous because of that +1
Because
speed.
the
But
extra little speed bonus.
yep.
Yeah. Which notably means that he's often actually willing to pay this as force together with this, just to go through his deck faster to filter for EXs.
Mhm.
Filter meaning that you will drop more cards in your hand size and then you'll discard cards. This is why
I
we call it
see.
filtering, is
I
that
see.
you filter the best cards into your hand, or you filter the worst cards out depending on your perspective.
Right.
So it's like pay a bunch of force, or so like always pay 5 life on this, right? Don't even consider paying fewer. You have 6 cards in hand, you boost this, pay 5 life.
Right. Just
Draw
make
6 cards.
EXs as best you can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then filter down to the exact hand that you need that will ensure your opponent's destruction.
Okay.
Yeah, and a couple important notes that Rushdown Akuma particularly likes to use is that this boost and then an ability,
Mhm.
or EX and ability is 3 bonus
Any
power.
EX. Yes. Right.
3 bonus power, I said.
Yep.
You don't need to
Three
be in exceed mode.
3 bonus power. Oh man, the card
Yeah,
can't get any bigger on my screen than that.
there you go. But yeah, so like notably, even though you will often need the tempo, that is, they need to conserve, need to spend as little time as possible building as dangerous a hand as possible. So you'll like to spend this as force. This boost is still usable
Yeah.
when you're not in exceed mode. You just need to be paying attention to the opportunities to use it.
Right.
You go, oh, I have EX assault and 1 gauge. I can boost this, and now I'm holding speed 9 assault that has I've lost track. A lot of power.
Yeah. However much
Um,
power you need, basically. Yes, power.
but yeah, yes
So
power, yes speed. Yeah.
so at that point, we're talking about at this point, Akuma is actually playing mix-ups. Does that telegraph the mix-up that you're playing, or does it not matter because you've actually just slow or like very briefly dipped into the defensive set play mode for a second to make something unbeatable, and it doesn't matter what it is?
So if you have no boost in play and you throw this out and you're in basic mode, you're telling your opponent, uh, I want you to believe I have an EX in hand.
Right.
You know, maybe you do, maybe you don't. But you're saying I look like I have an EX in hands, and if it's EX spike, then you do not want to be standing at range from me.
Right.
And so they're going to walk into range 1 generally, which is where you can play Zuga Hisatsu or Hyakushu,
Yeah.
depending on what you actually have. And maybe you don't. And if you actually didn't have an EX, but you still managed to get them to move, now you can boost power. And then you go, all right,
Okay.
cool. Now I'm gonna have plus 3 bonus power because I boosted this or fierce,
Right.
and I can crit. And so like you just gave me the setup I need. So that's an
So
example of like the defensive set play loop being used in an aggressive play style.
I see. Okay, that makes sense. So you're doing it out of order, but the component pieces are still there, and the reason you're doing it out of order is because you're creating time for yourself by producing the threat.
Mhm. Right.
Okay.
And if the opponent does not respect that threat, the key thing is, and this is where things will get a little silly, that you're willing to play into the odds the way that any character would, uh, and not be a coward, right?
Right.
So if you boost this and your opponent strikes anyway, forget this. Win the mix up, right? Like think about what they would have played into that, and then play like so. Something that I've actually had happen is like we're at range 3, they do this, or I do this, and they strike, and I'm like, okay, so you know, I guess they're anticipating a spike. They can play across. If they're anticipating EX spike, then nothing beats it. So they're clearly ignoring EX spike because EX spike is impossible to filter,
Right.
right? So EX spike is speed 7 power a lot, and ignores armor and guard. So since they're ignoring that, they must be playing against something else.
Mhm.
Well, the telegraph is EX assault.
Yes.
Cool. So they're going to play focus, maybe block, in order to cover EX assaults. Right. So I played crit sweep at range 3.
Right.
And I just, chunked them for 8, stun focus. The regular 2 power sweep. Didn't have any didn't have any bonus speed. Or sorry, 2 power, 2 speed. 2 speed. But like do things like that where you go, okay, I guess I need +2 power to win this mix up if I'm right about the mix up. So I'll have +2 power to win this mix up. And then, you know,
No,
Oh, did I drop?
that absolutely makes sense. I think I missed the very last word that you said, but I got the gist, and that absolutely makes sense. It's interesting because when I asked earlier about crit bluffing, um, you like that's definitely not a good idea because it's not a bluff. But we found the bluff. It's just that the
Yeah,
bluff needs. Yeah,
you bluff boost
right,
is what you actually can do.
right,
And like defensive set play will do that kind of by default. Aggressive is like the rushdown is usually not going to do that very often. Um, might have to. Mostly depends on your hand shape for what you need to threaten, what you need to do. Usually you want to be drawing cards, building EXs, throw plus 2 power on things. But yeah, so the thing I touched on a moment ago, I will make more explicit, which is that if you're running defensive set play, you're looking at this ability as I never want to use it because I need to be in exceed mode. And when in exceed mode, you're going, I never want to use this unless I have a guaranteed payout.
right.
If you're running aggressive, like Rushdown Akuma, what you should instead be saying is, how do I win this mix up? And if it requires you to have +2 power, have +2 power.
Okay.
Right? Like you go, oh, I'm calling sweep, and my hands only has Zuga Hisatsu. Well, that can be a sweep.
Yeah,
Just
I
crit.
can do it. I just need to believe in myself a little bit.
Yeah, just believe in yourself, right? Like just get it right, and
Yep.
don't be afraid to like do janky things. Which is to say, like you can just initiate at range 3 with critical spike or critical sweep. So your opponent's going to be like, you initiated it with a crit at range 3. You're probably playing on curve.
Yep.
That's what we call a mix-up,
That's
right?
why it's a mix up. Yeah.
Exactly. So like they play a sweeper focus and they get annihilated. Like live by those principles, and you will still be able to actually play a Akuma that is terrifying.
Yeah.
I know that's a different boost, but um,
Do
because
you
the way this character works is he doesn't give you the time to diffuse things. He just plays attacks, and you go,
right?
oh no, I have to participate in the mix-up.
It also sounds like because of the prevalence of set play Akuma and that sort of being central in people's minds, uh, Rushdown Akuma kind of like makes them have to reevaluate something at a time when reevaluating might be deadly, right? Like you need to change your perspectives on this character very quickly, or you're going to get killed.
Yeah, if you're ready for defensive set play Akuma,
Right.
and you end up walking into Rushdown Akuma, then you could be down like 14 to 16 life before you realize what's happening.
Right.
Um, because you lost 2 mix-ups, and guess
And
what?
that's
That's
enough.
half your life. Yeah,
Yep.
like, because you don't need to win very many if you're getting 2 extra damage off every payout. The key thing that you can't do as Rushdown Akuma is run out of gauge. So if you're committing your last gauge to a payout, you should only be doing that if you know you can get gauge the next turn, either with one of these boosts or with a normal that's like guaranteed to work, like a block or a EX cross or
Right.
whatever. Like just you must make sure that you still have gauge, because without gauge you are not playing your character.
Right. So just to keep your engine going at all cost, even if it means committing resources to it.
Yeah, like
Okay.
you can quite literally go, I have 2 cards in hands. One of them is this. I have 0 gauge. Cool. Pay a force, adds to gauge.
Yep.
Prepare.
Yep.
Like you have to do it.
You need to keep your resources online for crits so that you can participate in the mix up that you're creating.
Exactly. Like
Gotcha.
if otherwise your mix up is a normals mix up, right? Like
Right.
because your attacks are just going to be underwhelming. Like your specials are kind of underwhelming, except for the these 2.
Right.
If you're not committing anything to them. And actually for the Rushdown line, Go Hadoken is even kind of underwhelming for the resource you commit to it. Because it's mostly a defensive tool at that point. You go, okay, I either play this EX without crit, or I play this with crit at range 4 to just get a hit in. But like you can't afford a trade, so if you're up against somebody who has guarded projectiles, it's not reliable.
Right.
And then in all other cases, you really, really prefer the boost. Like why are you throwing this attack when you could play any other attack that also wins in the situations that it wins in?
Right. And the boost, as we talked about a second ago, helps you filter, helps you reload. You're going to be striking all the time. You can't afford the tempo lost to prep or something like that.
Right. And it's like at range 4, you could play this, and or you could play crit dive and go, oh, actually I'm just going to hit you with 7 power dive.
Right.
And if they happen to play a focus, all right, that's bad. That's 1 fewer focus. That's good.
Yep.
The way you tend to lose if you're running Rushdown Akuma is you ran out of gauge because your opponent held some kind of EX that you just weren't planning on, and they respond with an EX, and you go, "Oh no,
Right.
my attack got blown up and outsped, and that was my last gauge," and that's what kills you.
Right. The loss of setup, the loss of a mix up
Momentum.
when you were sure that you had something that could keep yourself going.
Yeah, it's like you played something where you looked at your worst case and you thought it was acceptable, and then actually your worst case was they won cleanly.
Yeah.
Because if you initiate, and this is common knowledge, I think, but if you cleanly lose a strike you initiate, it's like one of the worst things that can happen in Exceed.
Right.
That is a massive loss.
Right.
Where it's like, oh, I got no value, I got no positioning, I just got whoops.
Yep. It's my opponent's
Yeesh.
turn. I've lost a card. Maybe I've lost more than one if I've committed more to it.
Yeah. So it's like that, and that's intensified if you're somebody who has crits or other resource expenditure things where you go, oh, I committed, you know, like this is why. Well, fight's a different character, right? But this is why the standard fight opening, I'm perfectly willing to cross out against this noted long range character
Right.
because if he pays free cards to miss me, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And so
Okay.
same principle here, where it's like, okay, Akuma paid, a gauge and an EX, but you managed to prevent him from hitting you. That is phenomenal.
That's a really big deal. Okay, that makes sense. Uh,
Hmm.
really incredible segue there, D. Actually, the last thing I wanted to ask you about was if there were any characters that you could draw comparisons to between with Akuma. You know, like what other kind of
Oh,
character or what other character plays like this?
gotcha. Yeah. So, well, I will actually point out Fight because that was unplanned, but we'll take it.
Yeah, exactly.
Fight is also a character who neatly will run both defensive set play and aggressive lines. Often he actually play. Fight is a character who typically plays both of them each game. He usually does not commit hard to one or the other, as a rule. Like I don't see very many people who play only Rushdown Fight or only defensive set play Fight. Um, and his tools for doing either are a little worse than people who are dedicated to one or the other, but it's nice that he gets to do both every game, basically.
Right.
Um, and for him, the transition point is generally when he exceeds, you kind of lock in what's going to happen for the rest of the game. Um, and there's some variation how that works. But yeah, like fight. So robot named Fight, or sorry, Fight from a robot named Fight.
Yep.
Fight Smith is his full name. Is a character who has similar dynamics of he's got a really solid boost kit with a lot of bonus speed, and he's good at adding power to everything. So it's like, hey, that sounds a lot like defensive Setplay Akuma. Also, he's good at adding power to everything. Hey, that sounds a lot like Rushdown Akuma. Like, you can
Okay.
you can do that.
Okay.
May I hop in
Generally,
with some other
Mhm.
suggestions
Really
for
blue.
comparable characters?
Go
When
for
it
it.
comes to rushdown lines, some other comparable characters with similar strengths and weaknesses to specifically Rushdown Akuma would be characters like Soul Bad Guy and May from Guilty Gear Strive the board game. Both of them have similar strengths and weaknesses where they're very resource oriented, but just blow you up.
Yep. Yeah.
Soul actually has basically the same dynamic of all I need is one, but if I ever lose that one, things are looking
Things are bad for you.
very, very bad.
Yep. Yeah. The if I'm running Rushdown and I get to say, oh, I have +2 power every single turn, that feels pretty good. That's May. If you want to say I have +3 power every single turn, hey, that's Soul. By the way, if these numbers don't add up, I'm talking about their exceed modes.
Yep.
But yeah, so they start with 1 and 1. Oh, sorry. Soul printed is 2. This is a lie. If you review Soul's boost kit, you will find that Soul does not have +2 power. He has +3 or 4.
Yep.
Because he cancels from power boosts. May actually it pretty much is just +2 power every strike. But yeah. Well, every strike she initiates, but that's most of them by the time
Right.
she's doing that. Yeah, those are solid examples. For the defensive set play line, characters who have a lot of speed boosts tend to support defensive set play loops,
Mhm.
and just generally outside stats because these are the characters who are willing to like hide behind one big stat number until they can get the right attack to capitalize or get the boost suite in hands to engineer the confluence that they want. Um, so like notably, Lucia has big speed boosts and has a late game that turns into awesome amounts of power on top of her speed boosts, and has generally fast
Lucia?
attacks as well. But yeah, Lucia. Um, And then let's see, who else? That's a good example. Funnily enough, Ryu's kit does not actually play into the defensive set play loop in the way that you'd expect because his defenses are too committal. Like, he has to decide how he's defending. He can't just throw stuff out with a boost in play.
Right.
But Ryu's boost kit is this kind of like, I'll just always have more stats than you. In a fit of irony, I will observe that Guile is actually very good at defensive set play, but he's only very good at it for one turn at a time.
Right.
This is a Guile dynamic. I'm sure that will be a separate recording.
Yep.
But yeah. Who else? Rachel does a little bit of defensive set play, but she does it with simultaneously boosting and positioning, which is kind of like, it's a Rachel dynamic. Because like Rachel is a I believe the term is wave dasher. She has little micro position adjustments that she can make all the time. Which is also a thing that Renea does. Renea probably does this. I'm terrible at Renea. Couldn't comment. Can't help you there.
We'll have to wait for Byron's guide on Renea later on in this project.
Here's the defensive subplay character from Street Fighter.
There we go.
Yeah, like that's number one right there, Chun-Li.
Yep.
She is built to have the defensive subplay loop, and she does it really, really well.
Okay. Perfect. All right. So anybody who's interested in who has found Akuma and really likes them, maybe try out these characters. If you already play these characters, probably not Sweep. Don't play Sweep. These characters over here.
Sweep is good.
Play Sweep. What is Sweep's Exceed side? Oh, Exceed fighting system.
It's not very good. Sweep's Exceed side is that you get to look at the top 3 cards of your deck instead of the top 1 card of your deck, but you have to discard one, and Option Bleed kind of sucks. Also, if you like Akuma, you might like Sweep the character, aka Marathi.
Okay, fair enough. There you go. So for these characters here, though, if you already like Akuma, try these guys out. If you already like these guys, maybe give Akuma a try if you've never considered him before. I know when I first started, my read on Akuma, like I said near the beginning of this lesson, I thought of him as a gambler character, and at the very least, the defensive set play line that is completely wrong. So maybe give him a revisit if you dismissed him the way that I dismissed him, because he's got a lot in common with some characters you might like.
Yeah, he is at the very least much more than that.
Yeah. D, any last words before we sign this one off?
Nothing in particular comes to mind. If you're able to build Gauge with Fake Out, then don't feel bad about holding EX Go Shoryuken, because Exceed Mode EX Go Shoryuken is world shattering.
Is a lot of stuff.
It's 1 do 7/8. And if you put something else on top of it, it becomes extremely stupid. And that I don't care what version of Akuma you're playing. That's a really fun stat line. Oh yeah, I don't think I mentioned that Rushdown Akuma also plays Spike, but like, who doesn't play 11 power Spike?
Right. Yeah.
That's another card you don't have to crit. You can just play it, because if you win the mix up, you win.
You win.
And if you lost the mix up, why are you giving your opponent +2 power? So
yep,
you just play it.
Yeah. Simply don't lose the mix up.
Yeah, just win the mix up, y'all.
Mm-hmm.
That is my advice for anyone playing Street Fighter characters or Exceed.
Exceed isn't hard. Just don't lose the mix up.
Read your opponent's mind, play the thing that wins.
Yep, pretty much. All right.
Can confirm that works every time.
Yeah.
D, thank you so much for the inaugural lesson. And stay hydrated, of course. Yes, that's not true of just Akuma. That's everybody.
Yes.
But frankly, Akuma, you specifically, get some water in you, man. You're looking kind of parched.
He's got these like flames all over him. That can't be good for his skin.
Exactly. All right, D, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate this first lesson in this series. I'm hoping to talk to you a lot more about a lot more characters. Blue, thank you for chiming in. We'll be hearing a lot more from Blue on a lot of other characters. I look forward to talking to you guys again soon. And I'm going to end the recording now. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you.
Mm-hmm.